Welcome to the Parenting with Confidence podcast. I am your host, Theresa Alexander Inman, board certified behavior analyst and infant toddler developmental specialist. Today, please welcome Mr. Robert Wheeler.
That's fancy. That's fancy. All
Gotta
right.
fancify my simplicity.
There you go. Hey, it works, It's got the fancy, it's got the fancy factor.
Yeah.
Uh, well, I'm excited to be here. I am a CPA. I've got a tax practice with about 1,000 clients. I'm CFO at the world famous Comedy Store in Hollywood and La Jolla, California. And I've been on a mission to just talk about money and really normalize, neutralize conversations about money. And financial literacy is just a big part of that, learning how to have difficult conversations. And to that end, I got really inspired to write a children's book series called Financially Fit Kids with a Z. And what happened was I went to the editor and I said, listen, I want to write these books and I want to have a very wide welcome of children. I want to see people of color. I want to see wheelchair users. I want to see adopted kids and foster kids and all of the different elements that people sometimes don't see themselves represented, And so I wanted to write these stories that would be fun for kids, but that foundationally had some budgeting and goal setting and leadership and advocacy and charitable works. And then at the end of the book, be able to give parents and teachers questions to help integrate those into a child's real world. And so I got really excited and I went to my editor and I said, this is what I want to do. I've got the story about Darius and I've got the story about Susie Lee and all these things. And she said, this is so great. She goes, there is one thing, Bob. And I said, yes. She goes, well, you're a white male and you're wanting to write about all these other perspectives. And I went, you're so right. What can I do? She said, you can co-write each of the books and bring people in from each of the communities and give them a spotlight. And then you can donate some of the proceeds to underrepresented communities around financial literacy. So that is what I'm doing. And I'm so excited because I Want a Dog is my favorite character, Darius, who just really wants a dog and, doesn't understand what goes with that or the cost or the responsibilities. And through each of these stories, kids start to learn about choice, decision-making, financial impact, and all those things. And so he's the first one. And then Susie starts a business. It's about a little girl who starts selling, toffee at school and doesn't realize that taking all the ingredients from her mom and dad's restaurant, there's cost. Right. And so they're just different stories to really help kids start to see it differently. Not making it bad, not making it hard, but then also just really wanting to have a representation of so many different kids because it's so important to have a wide welcome, to let everybody know that they're welcome. The kids clubhouse is called All Kids Included. And it's to me just so important to let people that may have felt left behind before get to feel like they're part of this.
Wow, that sounds amazing because talking about money seems so taboo these days.
Yeah.
I mean, still is taboo. It's been taboo like over the years, but the fact that it continues to be taboo is really, it makes me uncomfortable because if we don't learn to manage money, what happens?
Yeah, a lot of craziness, or we just hope that it works out, and not being able to have those conversations to ask for a raise, to be able to advocate, to be able to say, no, that's not going to work for me. That doesn't align with my values, and being okay with walking away from something that doesn't serve us.
Absolutely. I remember my sister worked for a company in Manhattan and they represented a lot of big brands. So she went in and I think she started with them in like August or September. And in November, she's like, Sissy, I'm going to ask for a raise. I was like, what? I was afraid for her.
Yeah.
That she was going to ask for a raise. And they actually gave her more than she asked for. That was a lesson for me.
That's so awesome. Well, it's interesting when people ask for raises, and I did the same mistake. I went in and asked for a raise based on my needs. And my boss, who was amazing, looked at me and said, there's no way I'm going to give you a raise based on your needs,
Right.
but I am going to give you a raise based on your merits because you bring so much to the table and we really value you here.
Yeah.
And I was like, what? You want to pay me for my value? Um, right. And that took a little bit to process. And so I was really grateful for that lesson because I see people that do that. And it's really about, this is how I show up in the world and I'm a valuable asset. Pay
Yeah,
me what I'm worth.
absolutely. And if we teach children that from a very young age, imagine when they grow up, just the confidence that they have and just the feeling of being valued
Yeah.
it's priceless. It is
Yeah.
absolutely priceless, so that is such, it's just so valuable to do. And, I see children who, the other day, this little girl, somebody made fun of her and she said, well, my daddy says I'm beautiful. And I thought,
Ah,
what? I was like, she held her head high, her shoulders were up high. And, because value is more than money. Value
mhm.
is so much more, like the most valuable things are not, there's no money, related to them. There's no like money figure associated to them. But money is also really important because without it, you and I would not be here right now.
No, that's true. But to your point, value is what we are when we don't have anything. Like when
Ah,
we don't have our assets, it's like, what is our true worth? Um,
mm,
our gifts, our compassion, our community. But money is a part of everything we do, whether I'm buying my lunch, whether I'm buying a school uniform. And kids get shamed really early on or know where they are in the socioeconomic pecking order if they're on the free lunch, if they don't wear the fancy clothes, if they have to bring a paper sack instead of a fancy lunchbox, if they're not getting sun capris, right? And all of those things, kids are already making a judgment. You're not as good as me, or I'm not as good as you.
mhm,
And kids can be cruel, not intentionally.
right.
But this starts early. This starts early about who we are and how we get to show up in the world.
It really does. And of course, it starts with the parents. And, we just want to appeal to parents, right? To do these things. First of all, teach children, like you said, the value, because that's, everything but the money. And
Right.
then once we do that, then let's talk about the money. Because if we don't, your child may end up in a cardboard box somewhere,
Yeah.
on the street living, so again, because there's so many people who've actually, accrued a lot of money and now have nothing.
Right. Yeah,
So,
absolutely. It's so important. And, like for me, and this isn't, again, this isn't blaming parents,
mm,
right? They did the best they
right.
could. So there's no judgment here. My parents struggled. They had 5 kids. So if I saved money, my parents might empty that out and use it
Yeah.
to buy some food or whatever they needed. And it didn't get repaid. So for a while, it was like, why bother saving?
Mm,
Right. And so that was my story, was it's somebody's going to take it anyway. So why? But the more we can start to cultivate those little habits of saving some money, understanding that maybe some of our money should go towards charitable works or
yeah.
good deeds, or if we don't have money, we do the service, right? And instilling values that we think are important and that we want them to carry into their adulthood.
Mhm. Absolutely. Yes. And I'm not sure if we had this conversation before, after, but we talked about the fact that most divorces are tied to money. And if we're not, if children are not aware, if we don't teach them from early on the value of financial literacy,
Yeah.
then that becomes a real sticking point later on.
Yeah, absolutely. I had a woman come to me who was getting ready to get married, and she said, look, I'm getting ready to get married. Um, I have some issues around money because of my parents.
Mhm.
Um, and I don't want to do the same thing. So when she was a kid, dad didn't like to spend money. They were saving. And so mom would go out and spend crazy amounts of money. She would have the kids help her hide everything in the closet, and you
Mhm.
would leave it in the closet for 1 or 2 months. And then you would start using it. And then dad would say, is that new? Oh, no, 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 I've had it for a bit. And so the kids were in on it, right? Helping hide and don't say anything to daddy. And so she grew up knowing that moms should lie to dads to keep the peace. Now, ultimately, her parents divorced. And she just said, I can't do that to my husband.
And then ultimately to the children, because we become our parents.
Right. Don't make the kids complicit in your financial infidelities.
Exactly. I love that. So, Bob, how do we start the conversation with our children? How do we start teaching them financial literacy?
So I think it starts with basic conversation, right? You're not going to sit down and ask your kid to help you invest in your 401k. You're not going to take it to that kind of thing. It might be something as simple as the first time they get a $10 bill in a birthday card of saying, wow, this is so exciting, $10. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to break it up into $1 bills and $3 are going to go into a savings account and $1 is going to go into an emergency fund, right? And the rest you get to spend however you want, so that they start to see, oh, if I get $100, some of it needs to go to other places. And just to start that kind of conversation. Or when a kid says, I really want that truck, or I really want that doll. Okay, well, we can save for that. And if you save up $10, mommy and daddy will match it. Right. And I don't always want to say mommy and daddy, because there are so many different ways that a family can look.
Yeah.
But going to the parents and saying, look, hey, we'll pony up, but you got to meet us halfway, so that we're teaching them that they have to set a goal and then they can receive support, but not, well, I'll just buy it for you, or you have to buy it yourself because I'm never going to help you. And so we teach them partnership. We just start to have those conversations. Or even when they say, like, I want a pony. Well, that's not in our budget. We don't have a big yard. It costs this much money. And to start having simple conversations, or even letting them partake in a family meeting, once a month, of how we're going to spend our money. Let them decide on the little things, so that they can start to see, oh, I can be empowered, giving an allowance. But to start to have these conversations, not making them wrong, or how dare you ask how much I make. But those are things some people don't like to talk about.
Right.
In our family, we can. And to just start to set boundaries, and just having these conversations that normalize the topic.
Wow. Yeah. And start simply and start small. Thank you. That's so cool, because we want to make it as easy as possible for parents to implement. They have enough going on right now.
They do. One great thing to do is get a clear piggy bank, right? A clear jar, a clear piggy, a bunny, whatever. But if it's clear, then the kids can see their money in the piggy bank, right? And then I even suggest, if you're going to go split the toy with the kid, you've saved up your money, have them bring their piggy bank, so they have to feel the money coming out of the piggy bank, right? And then it makes it real.
Wow, so cool. I've never heard that tip before, and I love it. Wow.
We have to connect, right? We have to, everything is so, like, we use credit cards, we don't feel it. If you can start to make the connections as a kid, it's just so much more real.
Yes, and we need to make it, we need to make it real for them, tangible, where they can feel it and see it and understand, gain a better understanding of it, so that as they grow, as they mature, then their skills also go with them. Because I know for me, at 20, I probably had the financial literacy of a 7-year-old.
Yeah.
Because, just didn't know better.
Yeah. And you know what? You're not alone. And that's the thing. I mean, I sit here and clients will say, you're probably judging me. No, I sit here having not done the right thing for many, many, many years. And even when I first got my license, I was so embarrassed that I wasn't following my own advice.
Right.
I mean, I think I got into it because I wanted to learn and be able to understand it better, but I didn't know any better. So many of us.
Yes. And I just want to encourage parents though to have that conversation because for me, my mom was, I mean, she would give her 10 cents, she'd pay all her bills and still have money left over. You know,
Yes.
I don't know how she did it. She made miracles with money.
Yeah.
And, she purchased a home and, as a single woman and paid it off in a couple of years because
Yeah.
she did all the things. Like whenever there was a way that she could reduce her mortgage, she just knew all the things, but she didn't teach us any of that. And
Right.
that's the thing. So I was just, because we didn't talk about money. It's just
Right.
something that, mom and dad, they take care of, but it's not something that we needed to involve ourselves with. She didn't want me to work when I was 16. I had to sneak to get a job because
Wow.
I did. I was able to work at Canada's Wonderland for a school credit. So, and that's what I told her. It's for a credit, it's for school because she valued school. And
Right.
me, it was just something that, again, she was the one to take care of, but she didn't teach us any of this financial literacy. So I had to teach myself later. And I
Yeah.
thought, man, if I could have been like her, learned what she knew, I would have been a rock star.
There you, well, see, and that's what's so important is some parents may do it really well and then don't impart that information
Yes,
because they didn't realize that not everybody's getting it.
exactly.
So they didn't go, oh, I should teach this and pay it forward. Again, not intentional, just not realizing, oh, I figured this out, or I got really lucky and got some tools that other people didn't get.
Right. And I think also too, though, she probably looked at it as somewhat of a burden
Mhm.
to talk to us about, money and all this stuff, because we'd get money and we just spend money.
Sure.
She would save,
Right.
but we weren't taught. At least I don't remember ever being taught to save. And or we get money and she said, well, I'll hold it for you.
Right.
So we never got to really, keep our birthday money and or whatever. So yeah, that's
Yeah,
really
I have a couple clients that are now in their 50s and mom and dad lived until they were in their 90s. Mom and dad handled their money up until they passed. So at 40 and 50 years old, th're handing their money over to mom and dad, and then mom and dad figure out what they need.
wow. Yeah.
It left them very ill-equipped when
Yes.
mom and daddy died at 50.
I cannot begin to imagine what that's like because now what do you do?
Yeah. Yeah. That's a rude awakening. That is a rude awakening.
Oh my goodness. Okay. So we go from the clear piggy bank,
Mhm.
and then what's next? After we, as we grow, as we mature, what do we do next?
Well, I think, and this is different for everybody, and it's not, you have to do this. I think setting up allowance is a great way to start teaching some responsibility. And now there's a lot of different ways to do it. Some people will set up allowance and then you have to pay $1 a week for living and you've got to
Mm,
pay 50 cents for dinner, or, and you create it so that so just there's an understanding of an exchange,
yes.
right? And teaching us that if we do the chores, we get paid for it. If we don't do the chore, we don't get paid. It's not just because I showed up and smiled, right? To show some responsibility, and not that we want everybody to like, oh, I must work hard for a paycheck. I'm not trying to suggest that at all, but just that awareness of an exchange of service for money, or for a place to live and money, and start to give allowance out so that they can then start to buy their clothes. So maybe not at 5, but maybe, at 10 years old, you're giving the kids, here's $100. We would have gone out and bought you your clothes for the start of the school year. You get to pick them. However you want to spend. You want one pair of shoes? You got a pair of shoes, you're going to wear your old blouse or your old t-shirt. If you want to split it up and get 12 t-shirts and a cheap pair of shoes, but let them start to have an impact, but where it's not going to be detrimental. Maybe this is the school clothes you get to buy that last till December, and then we'll buy more in January so that they're not having to live 12 months with a bad choice.
Wow, that is so cool. Yeah. And I actually like the idea of them paying towards their rent, or living expenses,
Mhm.
because then when they get older, they're already used to that.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting. A lot of younger clients that I have in their 20s, early 30s will say to me, do you know how stressful it is to go out and pay rent? My parents want me to go pay rent. I'm like,
Yes.
we all pay rent. They're like, this is crazy. And I'm like, you're you're almost 30. What do you mean you don't feel comfortable paying rent? Who's gonna pay? Right.
Exactly, that's it. 'Cause, I know too, like you have friends who children lived with them and didn't pay rent, but they were okay going out there and paying rent. It's like, I'm not paying my mom rent,
Yeah.
and I thought, wow, it's
Yeah.
like you should pay your mom rent because that's showing respect. But
Right.
if you're paying a stranger rent, or because I guess because they weren't taught that, they
Right.
understand it's mandatory to do it out there, but it
Right.
isn't to do it at home. It just didn't feel comfortable because they were never used to. It wasn't a thing that they did to have to hand money over to their parents.
Yeah. And it's interesting. Some parents will take all that money that they get paid for the food and the rent, and they
Mhm.
put it in a savings account for them for when they graduate high school or when they go off to college. And so a lot of times they get it paid back to themselves anyway, right? But it's still creating that habit. There's a great, and I don't know if I'm sure you know of it, but if you don't, the Stanford Marshmallow Study. So this was a study done in 1972 where they gave kids the choice of you can have a marshmallow now or you can wait and get two.
Yes.
And they followed these kids for 40 years. And the
Mhm.
kids that learned delayed gratification had incredible success, tenfold, over the kids that just learned to give me my marshmallow.
Right. Yeah, that is so huge.
Yeah. Yeah.
That is really big because then, because again, we have to wait for a paycheck. Those of
Right.
us who get paid by paycheck, we have to wait. Yeah, you don't get it like the second you work. It's like it doesn't come, it's like, okay, I just earned, my whatever, how many ever dollars an hour, hand it over.
No, and if you're a teacher or a lot of nonprofits, they pay once a month.
Yes.
Ah,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, which is so it makes it even more important that we have this conversation
yeah.
because again, learning to budget.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. If you're only getting paid once a month, you're going to learn to budget real quick or go hungry.
Right, exactly. Hopefully you paid your rent and your car payment first.
Exactly. Exactly. Get those out of the way.
Oh my goodness. Wow. Such great information, Mr. Wheeler.
Yeah, it's so important. I mean, every kid, regardless of whether they grow up poor, wealthy, whatever they're born into, learning these skills early on allows all of them a better chance at getting ahead when they get out in the world.
Absolutely. Realizing how important it is to not only save, but to invest.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, how early should we start teaching children to invest?
Well, I think, if they have an interest in it, I definitely think um as soon as they're ready, like if I want to learn more and I want to, you can, there are simulations of investing that you can get for kids. There's software where kids can do that. If you feel really comfortable, you could set up $100 account and sit with your kid,
Mhm.
right? And say, let's put some money in, what's your favorite toy? Let's buy some stock in that company, right? Or what's your favorite movie? And you can start to get them interested in stocks, for companies of things they enjoy or clothes that they buy. I don't think it's ever too early. Certainly they can't start putting money into an IRA, and well, there's no limit on that, but they have to be able to work, which means they can work filing paperwork at
Mhm.
mommy's business at 5 or 6 and start to
Right.
set up Roth IRAs really early. It's to me, it's never too early if the kids show an interest. And even if they don't, find ways to make it exciting, even if it's just through playing Monopoly. There's a lot of great games out there that teach people. I think somebody jokes, the whole lesson in Monopoly is you want to have real estate. Right?
Right. Yes.
So I don't think there's any too early age. I just think you don't want to flood them with, as 7-year-old, you're not going to go, let's start talking about derivatives and calls and puts. And do you want to put in commodities or like, wow, precious metals, right? That's a lot. But you can
Yes.
start with some simple stuff, or even just letting them see money in the bank and getting the interest on it, even though it isn't that great now.
Right.
You used to be able to go and they would write it in your passbook and you'd say,
Yeah.
look, oh my God, I get $3, right? Um,
Yep.
but just to spark interest, however that might look for each kid.
Awesome. Thank you so much, sir, for all this valuable information. Let me
Absolutely.
ask you, if there's one thing you want parents to come away from this moment with, what would it be?
Don't be afraid to talk to your kids about money. Don't be afraid to tell them that's personal, or that's not something I want to, you don't have to put a burden on a kid.
Mhm.
They're like, oh my God, we live check to check. But it's so important to honestly answer the questions to the best of your ability, and let them in on the world that they're going to be growing up into, because at some point they will have to take the reins. And the more we can give them information and not shame them for being curious, and not make them wrong for wanting things, but explaining we just don't have the resources right now. It's just so important to just start having conversations. You don't have to spill the whole beans, but start talking to your kids. They're smarter than you think.
They certainly are. And I learned that every day. There's some 2-year-olds who outsmart me. And I'm like, they're problem solvers. And I'm just like
Yeah.
blown away. And honestly, it thrills me. It
Yeah,
absolutely thrills me. But they're problem solvers. And
they
let's
are.
encourage that.
Let's encourage that. Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes. Again, I thank you so much, Bob, for being here and sharing all of this wonderful information that is so valuable. How can people get hold of you? How can they reach you, get to know more about you?
Absolutely. So the website is the Money Nerve, and that's nerve, Nerve, not nerd. I'm a money nerd, but it's the Money Nerve. That's got the children's book series and all that, information on that. There's stuff for adults. There's stuff for businesses. There's a lot of free resources, and we just love having conversations and help normalize the conversation around money.
Awesome, which is so, so important. I think you've really conveyed that message well to our listeners about the importance of money literacy, financial literacy. So thank you, sir.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Appreciate it.
You are very welcome.